Thanks for listening to the Hope Christian Podcast. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Transition Series, where we share the stories and testimonies from behind the scenes of the incredible transition of senior leadership at Hope. We hope you're encouraged that God is moving in mighty ways and that He wants to use you too. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being back for another episode of the Transition Series. The last couple episodes, I've talked with Cale and Pastor Barry on their perspective from the day that Anthony first spoke with me in his office openly about this transition. Anthony then meeting with Cale and I regularly, as well as meeting with elders one-on-one, sharing about what God was doing. Today, we're going to go into Anthony's perspective, going from that point up to the day that it was announced. There are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of things that God was still revealing and putting into place. So I'm here with Anthony again. Anthony, how are you today?
I'm doing good, my friend. It's good to be here.
So good to be with you. I love just getting to recollect all these things that God was doing throughout this process.
It's blessed.
So would you share with us, it'll be overlapping a little bit of what's already been said, but from that first day that we spoke openly and we heard about Cale's prophetic word and all those things, what was that like going and slowly sharing this perspective with each of the elders and looking at what would need to happen to actually candidate with the church in Fond du Lac as well as announce to the congregation? How did that begin to unfold?
Well, I would say that the first guy that I really wanted to make sure was on board was Barry. And so Barry and I think we went to the Italian coffee shop. And I said, hey, I kind of unpacked everything to him, kind of what had come up to that point. And I said, Barry, is this something that you would receive? And he was very, we had seen a lot. I had actually, if you noticed, I had started having you preach on a Sunday and doing some more things to kind of start grooming you. I kind of felt like if this is the way, we got to start grooming you. And then I met with each of the elders individually and just met with them, walked them through my whole process, like what we've just been hearing in all these episodes, and how my wife and I have come to this conclusion. And you had been here enough and had done so much good with our youth and young adults, and the way you loved well, the DNA of our church and how you fit right in. And I think all of them was a little bit nervous about it, but felt like God may be in it. And so I asked each one individually. In fact, I went to each one first and had each one pray specifically. I met with them one-on-one, and because I felt like I owed it to them after over almost 21 years, I owed the church that step-by-step process. And so I felt like if God was telling us to go, and He was telling me who the guy was to replace me, that He was going to prepare the hearts of each one of the elders too, but that I had to walk through a process. I couldn't skip it.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you started looking toward an official candidacy with this church. And I believe that was mid to end of April. So you're in discussions, God's still working on your heart and Lori's heart, and communication opens up about this candidacy. What was your intention going back out there? What did you need to see in order to really confirm that church was ready to receive you?
Well, I just, I remember I preached on the dry bones. And it was basically, God wants to. I'm a revivalist. I've tried being a good pastor. I'm not a very good pastor. I'm a revivalist, and I crazy want to go for Jesus, and that's what they need. It's not what they want, but it's what they need. And so I just decided to just lay it all out. And I remember saying to myself, if I get some people coming to the altar, that I would be, be a great sign of encouragement. And they had a large turnout of people come for that, to hear, for that size of church. And there was almost about 170 people at the altar. And it was like, wow. And they were like, absolutely, we want God to move. And it was almost like the Lord said, this is what you want. I'm going to one up you. And so my wife and I were stunned and were shocked. And, it pretty much takes away every one of your, you if you don't go now, you just don't want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember eagerly waiting to meet with you when you came back. All those that knew that this was going to be a pivotal moment. Because again, God could be moving and orchestrating things, but if a church just isn't going to receive you, they're not going to receive you. And so we knew this was a pivotal moment. You got back on a Monday or Tuesday. We were going to have breakfast the next day. You shared that with me, that Holy Spirit just took over. People were hungry. They were willing. So we looked forward to, okay, we've got the FCA conference coming up in a couple weeks. You were only back for a couple days before turning around and going to speak at another church before this conference. But we knew that the elders were going to meet after you had left, that they were going to decide if they wanted to make an offer. And that process was longer than expected. For the response that was given, it was just a long process. And so we're all waiting to hear. Then they do extend the offer, but they need a vote from the congregation. So we get back from FCA and share a little bit about that we were wanting to announce pretty quickly because we knew the time was moving. We didn't have a whole lot on our side. What was that like as far as wanting to announce, but then not being able to and waiting for the vote and waiting for the official offer? How did that go?
Well, I think for me, I understood where they were coming from. I didn't want to say anything here because it wasn't official. And so, I didn't want to get the cart before the horse. And yet I wanted to give you enough time for transition. We hadn't even, our house wasn't for sale, nothing. It was, and I knew that if we moved, we needed to move before the end of the summer because we had kids going to school and all that. Yeah. And so it's just like, it's like, okay, you're at the mercy of God now because you can't say anything. You can't even tell some of your outline staff because if they say no or if something goes wrong, now you've basically said my heart's somewhere else and yeah, I'm going to stay now. And so, it was a lot of praying.
Yeah, it's tricky. So then towards the end of May, they had their official vote and it was almost unanimous. I think it was like 97%, something not even necessary. And we knew, all right, this is happening. God's laid every piece. He's formatted this whole thing from start to finish. There's a week leading up to Memorial Day. And what else can you do but just lay it all out? And you, Lori, and I were figuring out what that service would look like and how you would open and you'd preach and you'd share. Lori would come up and share, and then I would come up and share. And you just have to send it. There's no other way. How do you tiptoe into something like this? And I remember sitting there on that Sunday, and I remember Caleb didn't even want to, it was just hard for all of us. Nobody wanted to face the grief of the fact that you guys would be transitioning. But then there's also the excitement of how do we articulate how incredible God has been moving and that this is actually above and beyond what we'd ever expect. What was that like for you as you were constructing that service?
Well, I reminded myself of what I claim I was building. Because if you think about it, if you're building to change over, there comes a day you have to move out of the way. And to me, I was very excited from this standpoint. I wasn't leaving the church to falter. I was leaving the church with somebody that could take it farther than I could. And it's a great piece when you know that you're leaving the church in good hands and that there's not this big wrestling match of who's in, who's out. There's no popularity contest. It is like God has raised up the man. God has ordained him. God has set him inside I knew the church would, you were already well received. So I knew you'd be well received. I wanted it to be a vision day and not a farewell day.
Yeah.
And so that's what we really endeavored to do is like, let's show people what it's like when you step into what the kingdom looks like.
I remember your piece and Lori's piece were incredibly powerful, very moving. I got up there. I don't even think I had necessarily told you what I felt led to speak on, but in my mind, I'm the type of person, lay it all out. You know, when you know that God's moving, none of the details matter anymore, but just get it all out in the open and allow the Spirit to move. And so I stood up there and I listed it off and said, I'm 29 years old. I don't have a Bible degree. My resume matches something very different than what God's calling me to step into. But I can stand before you guys and say that because God's in it, He's going to provide all the details. And I just laid it all out, all the qualifications or lack thereof. And service ended, and it was good. God moved, and the whole thing was powerful. But there was a span of 2, 3, 4 weeks where there's a lot of shock factor for people to unpack. I had people come up to me afterwards, and you, I'm sure, and different people, incredibly encouraged by what God was doing, but heartbroken. Obviously 20 years, there's going to be that. And there was this delicate season of walking through with people, declaring the glory of what God was doing, but also being there and recognizing that it was hard, it was very difficult, that God doesn't keep us from the hard things that cause us to grieve sometimes because He knows exactly what He's doing. What was that like for you?
Well, I learned a lot about glory and honor because they go hand in hand. You, as God, glory is seen most best when it's wrapped in honor. And to be able to glorify what God is doing and yet honor those who came before was done so well that I think the church was able to not grieve like a loss, but they weren't losing somebody. They were being challenged for the next step. It's like Moses is gone, Joshua's here, and the promised land is before us. And I think it was communicated very well. I don't know that we could have done a whole lot more better the way we approached it. Obviously, we always like more time in these things, but that wasn't our timetable. That was God's timetable.
Yeah. Because as soon as the announcement went, that was end of May, you guys were going to be leaving. I think you left mid-July. So all of a sudden, we're on a 6-week timetable of going from first announcement to full commission and rolling out of the parking lot. And in that, there was still a lot that had to be done in Wisconsin to, sell this house, to buy a house out there, to pack up. And so a few of those weeks, you guys were out of town, which was incredibly helpful for me because we got some practice runs and it was totally new territory. I remember the first Sunday that you weren't there on vacation before the actual commissioning. It was just, that empty feeling where you're like, I don't even know. I've just been here to support this whole time. And now you got to hold all the ropes and not only just the physical operational, but there's a spiritual significance to that, And so I'm figuring this all out, and we're obviously talking very regularly. We're getting all the details ready and a ton on your guys' plate to try and pull off an A to Z move in 6 weeks, rolling out of the parking lot. But we come to the commissioning. The commissioning was 1 week, and then the send-off the next week. And by the time that all came, God was moving so powerfully. Nobody was looking back. There's incredible favor over the congregation. Still to this day, I look around and I just see the favor that God's given through all this. Compare that to what most transitions look like or what my resume looks like on paper. All those things that logically it shouldn't be going this way. But we go into the commission and it's so evident. We go through commission day. God moves powerfully in that. And then we go towards the send-off. And God moves powerfully in that as well. Very exciting and emotional time. And then it's time for the official move. And tell us the perspective of your whole family as that day's coming, where it's, hey, we've been looking towards this for several months, seeing God put all the pieces, and now it's all coming to fulfillment. What was it like for your family?
Well, I would say just for me, I'm a look ahead type of person. So, and I'm very much like you. It's like, I love what happened. And even after 20 years, I love what happened, but vision is always moving forward. And so I was able to move forward fairly quickly. My wife was really struggling with the transition. Not that she didn't know God wanted her to go. It was settled. But just the close relationships, close attachments. My son Caleb probably had the hardest time because of his attachment to you personally and what that meant. And so he struggled. Joy is so apostolic. I mean, she's like, she wants to plant churches. So she has kind of my DNA, and felt like she was excited about the challenge. So the four of us, we set off, and we had actually planned our vacation before any of this, and we chose not to cancel it, but to take it, because we felt like it would help you to actually have some ownership while we were gone. So so we went on some vacation time, which was like trying to sell a house, and we just said, no, we're going to take our vacation anyway. It'll be good for the church to get used to Seth and to get used to Kale and the men running the show, and they're young men, and they've got to, and they need to see that they can handle it. The people need to see that these guys got this and that they're going to do a good job. And so the day of the transition, the day we left, it was the day of the send off was emotional to say the least, and actually. Probably, to be fully candid, getting, because there was so much we had to do, we didn't really get a lot of time to actually evaluate. The evaluation actually happened yesterday when I came here. And that's when I realized how much I miss, because I've just been so locked in.
Yeah.
So my wife and I are, now is probably our biggest struggle is right now, because being around you guys now and seeing everybody after we've already made the transitions, that's that today was probably the hardest challenge that I've faced in the whole thing. Just seeing everybody and
absolutely,
and looking back at hope is much farther along. And they're even much farther along now than just 4 months ago when I was here. And just missing, the hunger, the fight, the passion, where you guys are going, and seeing the joy. It's probably been, to be honest with you, this conversation is a lot harder than any of the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and during that time, because you're right, it was such a whirlwind in several different ways. And I remember thinking, as the send-off happened, I remember even at the send-off, I remember breaking down. There was, it's crazy to think that I had only been up here with you guys for 6 months, 7 months by that point. But leaving family in Arizona, I instantly became part of your family, to the point that even after I moved out and still had a key, I would show up unannounced Friday nights. I would jump in and have dinner.
You did. Yeah, that's right.
Out,
and we loved it.
It was literally as if there were no walls, no boundaries type of family. You can have your closest friends and you still don't just walk in and plop yourself on their couch unannounced on a weekend or Friday night. And it was difficult in that regard, because it was the second family per se to say goodbye to in 6 months or so. And I remember getting to the day that you guys were actually leaving, very hard day. By that point, all my tears, I didn't have any more tears. Like I'm one of those people, like eventually it just runs out and, it just goes. But even on that morning, coming together and a lot of tears, and you guys rolled out of the parking lot. And I remember when it was all said and done, walking out from the parsonage to the church building. And it was that first feeling of like, in my carnal mind, it was like, it feels so empty. Like what do I even do without Anthony and Lori here? It just felt like such an empty boat. And it was no question of what God was doing or how he had confirmed things, but it was just that very first hollow feeling, watching you guys drive off. And throughout it all, though, it was high gear, and all of a sudden you're working multiple jobs at once and learning ropes and all kinds of things. But the whole process, God is so faithful. And I just can't tell you enough, and Lori and Caleb and Joy, the impact you guys have on my life is immaculate, is substantial in such a short amount of time. And, you'd never think that you could necessarily create family so quickly. But the way that you guys brought me in, loved me, actually made me a part of your family, and called out destiny and calling in me that I would have never believed in my wildest dreams. I can't ever thank you guys enough for being faithful in what God was doing and the way you impacted my life.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to share that what made the transition a sure thing for me, besides just God speaking, is that we have a praying team.
Yeah.
Nothing was done because people wanted to do it. They did it because they felt the leading of the Lord. They felt that God was in it, and they had prayed about it and sought God and sought counsel. And so, these transitions only work when Jesus is center, when the Holy Spirit has full access. They don't work because we want a cool fairy tale ending. They only work when men pray. They only work when people seek God. And that was the assurance I had. You and Cale and Barry and the elders. There was and even the staff. I'm thinking of our staff. Everybody was seeking God. Everybody wanted what God wanted. And man, when the team is like that, God can do whatever He wants. And that's what's happened here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what a run it's been. It has been a pleasure just unpacking all these things with you. God's fingerprints all over it. Thank you so much for being with us today, Anthony.
Amen. It's been more than an honor. Thank you so much. And you know what I believe for the church. It's you're only getting started. You're only getting started. I can't wait to see what is next. I can't wait to see.
Praise God. Love you.
Amen. I love you too, my friend. God bless you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Transition Series. We'll be back next week with more of the story. We love to hear testimonies about what God is doing, so if you have any personal testimonies to share, please submit them at hope-christian.com/prayer.